It rockets straight up, tears past the speed of sound, then vanishes from radar while the enemy is still hunting for it. The F-22 Raptor, the machine that crushed every opponent it faced, 144 to nothing, never once beaten. So why did it wait 18 years to open fire at a balloon? Picture yourself in the cockpit of an F-15, the fighter that ruled the skies for 3 decades. You're flying a training exercise over the Nevada desert, eyes locked on your radar, searching for the enemy. The screen is empty. Then, without warning, your headset tells you you've just been shot down. You never saw it coming. You have no idea where it came from. That actually happened at the Red Flag exercise in 2006. The Air Force dropped a new aircraft into a fight against its very best pilots, and the result became legend. 144 kills, 0 losses. An Australian pilot summed up the feeling in a line people still repeat. We were a high school team, and it was the pros. It was the F-22 Raptor. So what made it so far ahead of everything else? Start with speed. The F-22 hits Mach 2.25, more than twice the speed of sound. But that number isn't what makes it special. What makes it special is that it can sustain supersonic flight without afterburners, something almost no fighter of its era could do. Fuel saved, energy preserved, no massive heat plume for enemies to lock onto. Where other jets have to choose between speed and stealth, the Raptor has both. Then there's how it turns. The F-22's 2 engine nozzles can pivot up and down, a technology called thrust vectoring. Ordinary fighters rely only on their control surfaces, so at low speed or high angles, they lose control. The Raptor uses the raw force of its exhaust to stay balanced. It can point its nose nearly straight up without falling and swing through angles that leave its opponents stalling out. In other words, this was a machine built never to lose. But as you're about to see, for nearly 2 decades, it wouldn't be allowed to fire a single shot. The F-22's true stealth remains a national secret to this day. But one thing is certain. On an enemy's radar, this 62-foot machine doesn't appear as a fighter at all. Just a tiny, faint dot. And by the time the enemy realizes what that dot really is, its missile is already on the way. To hide that well, the engineers buried every weapon inside the fuselage instead of hanging them under the wings. When it fires, a bay door snaps open, releases the missile, and shuts. All in under a second. Too fast for enemy radar to register. Even the engine intakes curve like an S, so the spinning fan blades inside never fall into a radar beam. And in the cockpit sits a system that was years ahead of its time. Sensor fusion. Instead of forcing the pilot to read a dozen separate displays, the F-22 gathers every radar and sensor signal into a single clear picture. One glance, and the pilot sees the whole battlefield for hundreds of miles. All of it was conceived in 1986, deep in the Cold War, when the Soviets had just fielded 2 fearsome fighters, the MiG-29 and the Su-27. America didn't want an equal. It wanted a machine that could swallow those threats whole, and that's exactly what it built. The first 5th-generation fighter in history, leaving everything else in the sky behind. In 2005, the Raptor entered service. The perfect machine was ready for the war it was born to win. But for the next 18 years, it would never fire a shot. And the first thing to stay its hand wasn't the enemy. There's an irony sitting right at the heart of the F-22 story. It was forged to kill Soviet jets, but by the time it was ready, the Soviet Union was gone. The empire collapsed in 1991, 14 years before the Raptor entered service. From its very first year, it had no one left to aim at. Then came the one thing the Raptor couldn't hide: the price tag. The original plan called for 750 jets to replace the entire Air Force fighter fleet, but each one cost about $150 million, with development factored in more than $300 million apiece. The whole program ran to $67 billion. By 2009, with the Cold War long over and no worthy enemy in sight, that fleet of 750 was cut down to just 186. And the expensive machine turned out to be high maintenance in every sense. Its stealth coating was sensitive to rain and economics, demanding constant care. Every hour in the air called for dozens of hours on the ground. But its most serious problem lay in neither the coating nor the cost. It lay inside the very system meant to keep the pilot alive. Around 2008, strange reports began drifting back from the cockpit. Mid-flight, pilots grew dizzy, short of breath, disoriented. These were the signs of oxygen starvation at a deadly altitude, a condition that can rob a pilot of judgment before he even knows something is wrong. Over a few years, dozens of similar reports piled up. In November 2010, Captain Jeff Haney was flying a training mission over Alaska when his Raptor went down. He was killed. The crash became the center of a fierce dispute over the oxygen system and over how the Air Force weighed the blame it placed on the pilot. The anger boiled over in 2012 when two F-22 pilots did something unheard of. They went on national television and declared they would refuse to fly the aircraft. These were men chosen to fly the Air Force's most expensive treasure, and they said no. The pressure grew so heavy that the entire Raptor fleet was grounded for 5 months. The culprit, when it finally surfaced, was almost absurdly small: a faulty valve in the pilot's vest and filters that choked off the flow of oxygen. Stop and take this in. By 2012, the 7th year of the wait, the F-22 still had not scored a single air-to-air kill. But it had a problem more serious than any adversary that ever appeared on a radar screen. Its own pilots were losing faith in the system meant to keep them alive. The most feared machine in the sky still hadn't fired, and it would have to wait 11 more years. Late January 2023, the 18th year, and all of America looked up to see a giant white dot. A Chinese surveillance balloon nearly 100 feet wide, carrying almost a ton of equipment, drifting straight over the country's nuclear missile fields. After 18 years of waiting, the Raptor finally had a real target. Only it was a target no one had ever imagined. America didn't rush the shot. The balloon sat at 60,000 feet. Brought down over land, its debris could rain onto people below. So they waited for it to reach the sea. On February 4th, the moment came, and they called the Raptor. This was where the machine showed exactly what it did best: fly high. The F-22 climbed to nearly 58,000 feet into air so thin the wings had almost nothing to hold on to, where the smallest error turns costly. The balloon floated a little higher still, but that sliver of sky was precisely where the Raptor was built to work. Shooting down a balloon sounds easy. It isn't. The missile the Raptor carried, the AIM-9X Sidewinder, is a modern infrared weapon built to hunt targets that are hot, fast, and sharply defined, like a jet engine at full burn. But a balloon flies nothing like a fighter. It's slow, high, barely warm, and nearly motionless against the sky. For a heat-seeking missile, there was almost no heat to lock onto, and against the freezing backdrop of the upper atmosphere, that faint, warm shape was all the seeker had to find. This was the first time in real combat that such a missile was fired at a target this strange. No dogfight, no enemy pilot, no missile warning howling in anyone's ears. Just one Raptor at the edge of the atmosphere and a still white dot. It hit on the first shot. The balloon burst and fell into the Atlantic. 18 years of waiting, and the first shot in F-22 history was fired at a balloon. Hidden in that day was a detail almost too fitting to be true. The two Raptors flew under the call signs Frank 01 and Frank 02. Why Frank? In 1918, during the First World War, there was a 21-year-old American pilot named Frank Luke Jr. They called him the Arizona Balloon Buster. In just 17 days, he downed 14 German observation balloons, the most dangerous job of the war, since each balloon was ringed by anti-aircraft guns. He became the first American airman to receive the Medal of Honor. And the Raptor squadron flying that day was the direct descendant of Frank Luke's own unit. The same bloodline, 105 years apart, on the very same mission, hunting balloons. But 18 years of waiting didn't end with one shot. It ended with an entire strange week. On February 10th, radar caught an unknown object over Alaska at 40,000 feet, right in the lane of passenger jets. It was cylindrical, silver, and no one could say what it was. F-35s went up to look and came back with unsettling reports. The object had no visible means of propulsion, yet it flew. Some pilots insisted it interfered with their sensors. A Raptor was cleared to fire, its second shot ever. Another hit. But after 8 days searching the ice, the recovery team came back with nothing. To this day, the U.S. government has stayed silent about what it was. On February 11th, another object, this time over Canada. An American Raptor climbed, crossed the border, and fired. The first time in F-22 history it opened fire outside its home country. Third shot, third hit. That same day in Illinois, an amateur club with an innocent name borrowed from Pixar's Up, the Northern Illinois Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade, reported losing contact with its $12 balloon. It had quietly circled the Earth 6 times before its signal cut out, in the very same region, at the very moment the Raptor pulled the trigger. The club said nothing more. They simply noted that the balloon had gone missing. On February 12th, a fourth object appeared over Lake Huron. This time, the Air Force sent an F-16, 10 times cheaper than a Raptor. And it was that F-16 that missed its first shot. A $500,000 missile plunged into the lake. It took a second shot to bring the target down. In all 8 days, that was the only miss, and it wasn't the Raptors. When it was finally cleared to fire, the F-22 flew 3 missions, took 3 shots, and hit all 3. Not once did it stray. Asked what those objects actually were, General Glenn Van Herk gave a line for the ages. "We're calling them objects, not balloons, for a reason." Then he declined to say what that reason was. So, after 18 years, was the wait worth it? To answer, return to Frank Luke Jr. one last time. He fell in a field in France on September 29, 1918, only 21 years old. In his final fight, he downed 3 German balloons in 45 minutes, then took a bullet, ran out of fuel, made an emergency landing beside a stream, and drew his pistol and fired until the last round. His first grave bore only the words, "Unknown American Aviator." 105 years later, his own squadron, now flying Raptors instead of canvas biplanes, went back up to hunt balloons, carrying his name on the radio. There's a quiet sadness in that repetition. The most advanced machine in history, after nearly 2 decades of waiting, ended up doing exactly what a 21-year-old had done with a propeller plane a century before. But don't be too quick to laugh at the Raptor. It wasn't called on to show off. It was called because at that altitude, against that target, under that pressure, it was the most reliable way to finish the job with a single shot. And the deeper truth is this: the near-fatal oxygen crisis, the $67 billion price tag, the 18 years without an enemy, none of it made the Raptor lesser. It only proved one thing: this was a machine built for a war that never came. The F-22 never needed a war to prove what it was. Every adversary that came after it, Russia's Su-57, China's J-20, was built in its shadow, an answer to a question the Raptor asked first. For 2 decades, it set the standard that every other air force measured itself against. Its very existence shaped how nations thought about air power, without firing a shot in anger. That is a strange kind of victory. Most weapons are remembered for what they destroyed. The Raptor will be remembered for what it deterred.